define a legacy? And does a legacy have to be defined by only the greatest success you can get? Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And the reason I bring this up is because last night I was watching a delightful documentary for all the people of Buffalo. Everybody in Buffalo's pretty much seen it. It's a 30 for 30 from ESPN. It is called The Four Falls of Buffalo, highlighting the Buffalo Bills of the early 90s who made 4 Super Bowls in a row. Now, for those of you wondering, that is a feat that has not been done before or since. We're getting close with the Kansas City Chiefs. They've won 2, and they've been to the last 5, but not in a row. That's the key. So the question becomes, are the Bills 4-time failures who couldn't get the job done, or are they one of the 2 greatest teams of those early 90s years? And it's interesting when you really start to push people on this argument, because the Bills are coming back into a similar argument now. The argument of, is great good enough? Every year in the NFL, as you might imagine, there are 32 teams vying for one championship. You can break it down. You can say, well, they're also vying for their respective conference championships. They're vying for their respective division championships. Division and conference championships are really just a way of determining who's going to play for the big game. The only championship that is the championship, the World Championship, which is a bit misleading since there are no other teams from any other countries participating, but suck it, Europe, you haven't won a Super Bowl yet. That's an old joke. It gets used all the time. You find it everywhere on the internet. But the question becomes, how do we define these legacies? How do we define these players? Nowadays, we're sort of an instant reaction society, just in general. We like to instantly react to things as either the best thing to ever happen or the worst thing to ever happen. For example, let's take, I don't know, any of the hundreds of political stories that have come out over the last 10 years. And we talk about how this is the complete destruction of American discourse. We've never seen politicians bicker like this. We've never seen politicians so openly call each other out. Except we have. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams at the beginning of our republic very famously sniped each other in the press. Very famously. And not only famously sniped each other in the press, often used their version of a Twitter burner account. False names that they gave to the press to publish some of their more colorful insults to each other, often suggesting various deviant acts with farm animals were being carried on. Now keep in mind, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were best friends for a long time before they joined the Washington administration, and then obviously the Jefferson and the Adams administrations. But they were best friends before then, and they were best friends after. Even with their levels of insults, there was a certain amount of cordiality, and perhaps that is what we've lost in today's world, is the cordiality behind the insults. But regardless, the insults that politicians hurl today are nothing new. And again, I bring that up to highlight the fact that we are an instant reaction society. Apply that to sports. We have multiple quarterbacks playing in the NFL right now who can be classified as elite, or at least I would classify them as elite. They are doing things quarterbacks before them have not done. They are doing things that quarterbacks after them may do only because they're modeling their game after these guys. Patrick Mahomes is obviously, he's won a bunch of Super Bowls. He's done great. My hometown quarterback, Josh Allen, playing for Buffalo. He is, nobody serious disagrees with the fact that he is elite. You've got Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, the jury's still out. Trevor Lawrence, jury's still out. Tua Tagovailoa is a fine quarterback, but he cannot be classified as elite. But the real problem comes down to, you've got a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, who now has 3 Super Bowl rings in, I think, his first 6-7 years, something like that. So is that the definition of elite. We also have Tom Brady skewing the data because Tom Brady has won himself a mess of Super Bowls. How do we measure elite then? The Buffalo Bills of the early 90s went to 4 straight Super Bowls. Most of the guys who played on that team are in the Hall of Fame. So by the definitions used by the actual organization of which they were a part, they are Hall of Famers and therefore in the pantheon of the elite. But how do we define it? This goes beyond sports, because when you think about your own legacies, we get a little bit obsessed with being better than the average guy. Who is the average guy? The answer is probably you. Probably me. The average guy. When we say the average guy, we mean the guy in the middle of the bell curve. There are people who are smart and people who are uber talented and all that stuff. And oftentimes, we'll get to the uber talented in a second. And then there are the people who are uber untalented, and we'll get to them in a second. But the majority of people sit in the middle of the bell curve. It's not a bad place to be. The problem with bell curves is that people associate a moral judgment to a statistical set of data. All average means is that you're in the middle of the data set. It has nothing to do with you. If we break your life down into a bit of data, you are going to likely be somewhere in the middle of the bell curve, maybe towards the upper end, maybe towards the lower end. But that's just the facts. In terms of like the way people look, for example, most people are not 10s. If we're going to use a numerical, somewhat objective system to rank how people look in terms of physical attractiveness. Not everyone's a 10. Not everyone's a 10 everywhere they go. If you're in Los Angeles, you're competing with people who all believe that they're the most beautiful people in the world in one city. You're going to be skewed by that data. If you go to somewhere in the Midwest, you're not with all those people. All the people who thought they were the most beautiful people ever to exist left. They went to New York City. They went to Los Angeles. I'm a Buffalo 10. I'm an LA 7. I have no problem with self-confidence, as you notice. My point with all this is that you can't worry so much about accomplishments to try and define your own legacy. Why? Because in a lot of ways, accomplishments, or rather the stuff that people notice, they don't have anything to do with you. Let's go back to the Bills. Those 4 Super Bowls they went to in a row, a lot of work went in to get to those Super Bowls. So did a lot of luck. In the documentary, the greatest comeback of all time, one of the Bills' greatest games, the backup quarterback had to come in and he had to save the day and overcome a 35-3 score. One of the key touchdowns that led to the comeback was a completely illegal touchdown. Don Beebe was pushed out of bounds, reestablished himself in bounds, and then caught the ball that led to the touchdown. That's against the rules. But the refs didn't see it. That is an inordinate bit of luck that can spark a comeback. It's not good or bad. Again, it's just highlighting the fact that if we're going to hang our hats on, well, to be a winner, you really, you got to work hard and earn it. The answer is yes, you do, because you have to take advantage. And again, I talked about this in the last podcast. You take advantage of the luck that comes your way. But most people who are successful and smart know that most of their success has to do with luck and taking advantage of the luck. But most of it has to do with luck, hitting the markets at the right time, sticking through a bad decision, making a bad decision that in hindsight turns out to be the absolutely correct decision because you fly in the face of common sense. Legacies, to wrap this up because we're at the 10-minute mark, if you measure your self-worth and your legacy by objective benchmarks that you think other people are going to look at, if you measure yourself based on how objectively beautiful you think you are, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Because everybody, and this is the problem, defines that legacy differently. In the city of Buffalo, we're damn proud of the fact that our teams went to 4 Super Bowls in a row because of the amount of hard work we know that went into that. People who aren't associated with the city of Buffalo just see an empty trophy case. Both of us have legitimate data points to point to. My point is, calm down about legacy. It's okay. You're probably sitting in the middle of the bell curve, and you know what that means? Just do the best you can every day. The legacy you leave behind is, in fact, nothing to do with the money in your bank account, the trophies on your shelf. It has everything to do with the effect you made on people. We'll talk about that another time. I'm out of time. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.